that is 3-to-1 principle of location. It is also known as 6-point principle of location. This is used to locate your workpiece on a work table. We are talking about any machine like milling machine, lathe machine, drilling machine. Basically, there are three axes: x axis, y axis, and z axis. We are having a one object which we want to do machining process. We are locating workpiece on a work table. Suppose there is our workpiece and it is our work table. We need to define total degrees of freedom of the workpiece with respect to three axes: x axis, y axis, and z axis. We need to find different motion with respect to three axes. Starting with the axis, there is a x axis, y axis, and z axis, and the motion. There is a two type of motion: linear and rotating. Linear motion, our workpiece is move on the x axis and negative x axis, like this way and this way, and y axis and negative y side, this y positive and this y negative. The workpiece is linear motion on positive x direction and negative x direction. So this positive and this negative. Linear motion for x direction, positive, negative, y direction positive, negative, and z direction same as positive and negative. Rotation, the workpiece rotate in the x axis in clockwise direction or anti-clockwise direction, same as y axis rotation clockwise, anti-clockwise, or z axis per rotation clock or anti-clockwise. Here there is a 6 plus 6 is a 12 degrees of freedom. Our workpiece is, there is a 12 degrees of freedom. 6 degrees of freedom in a linear direction with respect to 3 axis, and 6 degrees of freedom of rotation. Now 3-to-1 principle used, there is a 6 different pins, bolt or nut, etc. We are supposed to do 3 different point, then after 2 different point, and then after 1 point. You are going to restrict total degrees of freedom of the object. Here there is a 12 degrees of freedom. This principle says that you start with the 3 pins or point to the bottom of the object. Here there is a 3 point which is bottom of the object. One is here, second is a same axis to the first, and third point here. These 3 points are restrict the negative direction, negative linear direction of z axis, and the clockwise movement of and anti-clockwise rotation of the x-axis here, and the clockwise and anti-clockwise rotation of the y-axis, these two. And the second point, which are perpendicular to the first plane. Bottom plane is which perpendicular to this. That's why these 2 points, which are restrict the motion, which are restrict to degrees of freedom in clockwise or anti-clockwise rotation of the z direction. So these are restricted, and the negative direction of the x-axis, this 2 point, and the first pin which is perpendicular to this both plane, which is here. These pin which are restricting in a negative y direction motion. So there is a 9 degrees of freedom are restricted by this 3-2-1 principle. So there is only 3 degrees of freedom remaining, which are the positive x direction movement, positive y direction, and positive z direction. 6 point, you have reduced 9 degrees of freedom of the object, and the equation and the question is arrived at about the 3 degrees of freedom, remaining 3 degrees of freedom, which is positive x, positive y, and positive z. So we are using the clamping device. So we have rigid the structure on the work table, which we have clamped 2 or 3 clamped to the work object to the workpiece. By the using of 6-point principle, we can reduce our loading and unloading time. We can have a perfect location of workpiece on a work table.